This week, the History Channel released Season 2 of their UFO Disclosure series. Does Episode 1 bring any new or interesting information to light? No. Stay tuned for more analysis, or subscribe and see if my answer changes with next week's episode. This episode brings us 4 previously unheard of stories. These stories involve military personnel seeing what presumably are UFOs. But really, we don't get much evidence besides their first-hand testimony. Now, we've seen in the previous season the Navy videos, the testimony by David Fravor that is very compelling. None of these testimonies really rise to that level, unfortunately. Let's go one by one. The first one is in Afghanistan. A soldier on night watch hears what he thinks is a jet, turns on his night vision goggles, and looks to the sky. He sees the jet that he hears, but he also sees a little dot that's flying around it at irregular speeds and velocities, and it's quite unexplainable to him. He notes this in his diary, and he tells others about it, and he seems quite shooken up about it and doesn't really know what to think. This is an interesting example because we actually get the experts on the show on there, and they give a pretty terrestrial explanation for this. They say that the missile defense systems on these jets have decoys which can launch out of the plane and then zoom around in different directions, and that from the ground that would look quite similar to what this soldier was reporting. So, I'm not really even sure why they included this encounter, as the show essentially dismisses it with a legitimate identified explanation. The next story comes from Vietnam. Here we have a pilot of a B-52 who says that his radio operator came on and told him that there's an object approaching at 60,000 feet. Now, during the Vietnam era, planes flying at that altitude were almost unheard of. He goes on to say the radio operator sees the object make a swift left turn and then rise up to an altitude of 100,000 plus and then disappear. Now this is interesting for 2 main reasons. First, this does appear to be very similar to some reports that we got in Season 1 of Navy operators seeing objects on the radar at around 60,000 feet, rapidly approaching to 100,000 feet or more, and disappearing, and then coming back down and kind of doing that over and over again. So, this kind of fits that model. Additionally, they say that the radar operators took some photos of the screen as this all was happening. Unfortunately, like a lot of incidents like this, those photos were then classified and we don't have access to them anymore. Freedom of Information Acts have not turned up anything yet, but potentially there are some photos out there that would be able to have us verify the path that this object actually did take, and that would be quite interesting. However, we don't have that, and all we have is the first-hand accounts, which, although they are credible, again, they are not any more compelling than stories that we've already heard. The third story is also from Vietnam. And this story is a pilot glances out his left window and sees what appears to be a metal object hovering in midair. He goes to his radio to tell other people, hey, what is this? And really, before he can glance back at it, it's gone. He can't see where it went. It disappeared. He seems very credible when he's recounting his story. And again, the show brings on some experts who tell some possible explanations. The explanations that they go through are mainly, it could have been a bomb or a dropped fuel tank or a missile. But they dismiss these theories as, hey, well, if it was one of these, it'd be dropping really fast and it'd be hard for the pilot to see it. One thing that they don't note is that if it was an artillery or a missile or something being shot at the plane, potentially that was the height of its trajectory, and it's just kind of momentarily, there right before gravity pulls it down, and potentially the pilot glanced over right at that instance, and that's what he saw. During the interview, they had the pilot describe the shape of it, and he actually drew the shape. It looked kind of like a water heater. The interviewer was trying to push the narrative that it was a Tic Tac type shape. The pilot says, maybe, but it really doesn't seem like it was a Tic Tac, and it seems like it probably was just something launched up at the plane that he glanced over at the exact right second. So again, this really doesn't provide any more compelling proof than what we already have. The final one is in 1999 in Kosovo. So in this one, a operator of a refueling jet, they see that there's a object lit up about 100 or 200 feet behind their craft and it's darting around unusually. They call the radio and ask if they are expecting any other jets to come up to be refueled. The answer is no, there shouldn't be anything within your vicinity. Despite this, they still see this ball of light following them. Eventually, the light raises up into the air and disappears. They don't give many good explanations for what this might be in the show. One potential explanation that they didn't go into is that the refueling boom was on fire. So these jets have a long boom that extends out the back, and they use that boom to hook up to other jets and refuel those jets midair. Potentially that with that boom extended, the end of it, potentially due to an electrical storm or something, maybe that lit up and there's a little fire on the end of that boom. It seems like that potentially would cause almost exactly what these pilots are reporting. A little ball of light following the craft, moving around irregularly as a boom shakes around, and potentially a drop of fuel could have dropped off and risen and disappeared. Even if that's not the explanation, again, we only have this first-hand account and we don't have any more evidence or radar signatures or really any other physical evidence to confirm this event. And so, I get it, History Channel. This is, they have a whole series to fill and they can't be giving groundbreaking new information with each episode. However, I am surprised that they did include these particular stories in episode 1 because they really aren't nearly as compelling as what we've previously heard in season 1. And I've done a little bit of digging, and I know that there are some compelling stories out there. In the intro for season 2, they did claim to have compelling proof to the origin of these objects. I'll keep watching to see if that ever appears. And if it does, I'll let you know. Thanks. I'm Rather Be Squidding.